When I was 12 years old and living in Ohio, I was a paper carrier for the Akron Beacon Journal. My route only had about 60 customers, but as we lived in a sparsely populated area, it covered about 1.5 miles. When I told my parents that I wanted to deliver papers, they were supportive. They were also very clear. "Mark," they said, "you can have a paper route, but you need to know that it will be your route, not ours." I thought this was fair. After all, I was the one who would be making the money. Because my parents were clear from the start, I never whined to them or asked for help when it rained or when we had a snowstorm and I had to travel on foot rather than on my bike, sometimes pulling a sled with papers loaded behind me. I never complained to them when I had to rise before dawn on Sundays, the only one stirring so early in our split-level house on Scenic Way Drive. I knew it was my responsibility alone to get the papers delivered. I didn't have that paper route for long. After 5 months, I decided I didn't want to be an independent businessman after all. I just wanted to be a kid. But I bring up the paper route this morning because it came to mind to me the first time I heard that story about Long Walk, Part of Gift. Although the Akron Beacon Journal was an evening paper during the week, holiday editions were to be delivered early in the morning. So on Christmas Eve, I set my alarm clock so that I would be sure to get the paper to my customers on time. The irony of setting an alarm clock for Christmas was not lost on me, even at the age of 12. As long as I could remember, one of my siblings or I would be wide awake on Christmas morning, long before our parents were, and in our excitement, we could be sure to wake each other up. As I set the alarm that night, I realized that I was taking another step closer to adulthood. Only grown-ups would need to set an alarm for Christmas. The next morning, when I stumbled out of bed, rubbing the sleep out of my eyes, I walked into the living room and plugged in the lights of the tree. I remember feeling melancholy as I realized I didn't have quite the same excitement about Christmas that year. The luster had worn off quite a bit now that I had become just another working stiff. I walked into the kitchen and quickly ate my Christmas breakfast of Lucky Charms. The only sound besides the crunching cereal and slurping milk was the furnace switching on. Just as I was slipping into my coat and preparing to leave the quiet house, I heard someone stirring. I stuck my head into the hall and saw my mother was up. She was dressed and she was putting on her coat. "What are you doing?" I whispered, not wanting to wake anyone else up. "I'm going to help you deliver the papers today," she whispered back. I swear I could hear the angels sing. Now, I don't want to schmaltz this story up too much. You might be thinking that, of course, my parents would have helped me on Christmas, or at least my mom. They would have been Scrooges not to. But even if I should have expected help that morning, the fact was I didn't. My mother's decision to help was a complete surprise and a wonderful gift. Easily the best one I received that day, even better than Micronauts and Mattel's electronic baseball game. Come on, Gen Xers. My mom drove me to all the houses on my route, and I remember us talking and laughing as we went. I described to her the people in each house, the special places they wanted their paper placed, on the porch, in the back door, on a box in the side stoop, proudly sharing with her my life as a paper boy. Each time I jumped out of the car and I left a paper for a customer, I could read the banner headline, "Merry Christmas," it read. Merry Christmas indeed. It was a special time for a mom and a son, and I treasure the memory of that morning together even today. I can still see her in the driver's seat, giving me the gift of her presence and her time. Looking back, I have to believe that she received as much that morning as I did. Life is so precious and easy to miss. We often fail to realize how the little things that we do for each other are often the most important. Now, my mother may not have imagined at the time that her decision to help me with my route would mean so much to me, but it did, and it still does. So much so that each Christmas morning, even these 24 years later, when I retrieve the paper from my front stoop, taking in the smell of cold newsprint, reading the seasonal banner headline, I think about that trip with my mom, that long walk we took together in the family station wagon that December morning in 1979, and I always smile. My mother's gift to me that morning continues to bring me joy, and it continues to move. When I say move, I don't mean because I get choked up when I think about it. I say that her gift continues to move because after enjoying her generosity toward me, I've been more likely to be generous with my time as my children are growing up. I'm more likely to be present to them in similar situations because my mother was present to me. I know this to be true because I've experienced something similar with another family member. He was a distant relative, though. He was on my father's side of the family, and I only saw him a couple of times a year at most when I was young. His name was Chuck. He was a bearded, jean jacket-wearing, Harley-riding man in his 20s who always had a twinkle in his eye when my brother and I were around. No matter what the occasion, Chuck always took time out to play with us. Usually we would end up chasing him or playing hide and seek. And I can still picture his lanky body running through the local park where the family was having a picnic one year, my brother and I screaming after him, having the time of our lives. Now, Chuck, who was the boyfriend of my father's second cousin, had little reason to pay us so much attention, right? But he always did. Chances are good he was just passing on the gift of attention that someone had once shown to him. And even though he's no longer in the family, I've not seen him for over 30 years, I have not forgotten Chuck, nor have I forgotten the gift of his presence and his playfulness. Nowadays, whenever I have opportunities to interact with children, or I find myself on the floor with my youngest climbing on my back, I know that I am moving that gift that Chuck gave me all those years ago. I learned about this idea of gifts that move when I read that in some tribal cultures, gifts are not offered with an expectation that there will be a return gift to the giver, but a gift offered to someone else altogether. There is an assumptive circle of giving in some of these cultures, a circle of giving that has no use, really, for two-person gift exchanges, which are viewed as commerce and lead to the treatment of gifts as capital. For these people, gifts are not to be hoarded, right? They are to be consumed and passed on to others. Simply put, the gift must move. Eventually, the gift, or at least the energy behind it, may find its way back to the original giver, but that's beside the point. In circular giving, a person gives blindly and therefore receives with blind gratitude as well. In circular giving, gifts are acts of faith. We give to someone who we know may not give back to us, and yet we give knowing that eventually we may receive from someone else. We give knowing that eventually our gift may, in a sense, go around a corner before it comes back, which, when it happens, teaches us to give and receive more freely. Early in my ministry here, Susan and I found ourselves as participants in a circle of giving, and I'm guessing Aaron and Joshua did recently too. You see, around the time our eldest daughter Leah was born, we learned the true meaning of being showered with gifts, as we were the recipients of dozens of baby presents from this congregation. We were overwhelmed by the generosity shown to us then, both before and after Leah arrived. And I remember being uncomfortable with all the attention. I didn't think we deserved so much generosity. Finally, a wise friend helped me see the light. She explained that the gifts had little to do with what Susan or I deserved. Mark, she said, you must learn how to be gracious and accepting of the love you get. It was the same message another wise friend had tried to get me to understand over 2 decades ago. She was doing her best then to help me celebrate my birthday, and I just wasn't playing along. I kept insisting that I didn't need anything special, that no one needed to make a fuss. At last she said with exasperation, "Your birthday isn't about what you need." It's about what others need to do for you. I started to get it. I think she was telling me to let people take that long walk for me. I know now that she was telling me to get out of the way because the gift needs to move. By the time Leah was born, I'd stopped feeling funny about all the attention and chose instead to appreciate and enjoy it, which is a good thing, because I wouldn't have wanted to turn down any of the generous gifts we received, especially the almost daily packages of food that arrived at our doorstep for the first few weeks when we came home. That food, as anyone who has been a new parent can tell you, was like manna from heaven. Delicious. In the end, of course, there is no way that we could possibly repay those who were so generous to us. But I suspect very few of the people who made dinner for us expected repayment. In fact, most of them told me that they cooked for us because when they had brought their babies home, people had cooked for them. They were simply passing on the gift. They understood that this generosity is a gift that moves. And perhaps the best part is that through their generosity, Susan and I learned this too. Throughout my more than 15 years with you, I have learned many times over that circular giving is actually what congregational life is really all about. All of us here are given opportunities to give without a sure sense of what the rewards will be. We're asked to share our time, our talent, and our treasure, yes, but even more importantly, we are invited to share at times a listening ear, a helping hand, a thoughtful voice, a compassionate laugh, a patient curiosity about another's reality, and a willingness to be changed, if not transformed. We are invited to be, as we say here each week, open to life, expecting to love, prepared to serve. And so we show up and we give in all the ways that we do, not because we know we will always receive an equal amount to what we have given. We show up and give because we have faith that the giving will lead us closer to the rewards of this life itself. And we learn over time that the gifts we share do return to us, eventually in different forms, as if they go around a corner and come back. We never know for sure how our generosity will return to us, but we learn over time that one way or another, it always does. At the council meeting on Tuesday, we were talking about what might come next for this congregation once I depart in June. We talked about being open to change. We talked about trusting the talent and wisdom of our lay leaders. And we talked about how faith and generosity in the present can lead to unexpected gifts that emerge in the future. It was a lovely conversation of gratitude for what we have shared, but also confidence about the future of this congregation, born out of the recognition of the 140-year history and legacy of First Unitarian that predates us all, the gift that moved that enabled us to even be here this morning. In essence, we were talking about the gifts of congregational life that move even over decades, the gifts that have greeted us when we arrived here, and the gifts that we have offered back. We were talking about the opportunity we have, even amidst change, to learn once again how to receive and how to keep the gift moving for those who will follow us. The connections that we foster here in our small groups, in our classes, in our music making, in our justice efforts, in our committees and our councils, and in all the other ways that we live our ministry together are the gifts that come about because of our presence and our generosity to the present. And lived fully with humility and with forgiveness and with humor, they are the gifts that always move. You know, when it comes right down to it, learning how to receive and keep the gift moving is not just about what congregational life is all about or family life. It's what love itself is really all about. Love is not something that can be hoarded. It's something that must be given away with the blind assurance that it will one day return to us. The love we give is also not something that we can expect in return. Love is an act of faith, a giving to the future, a passing on of this gift of life and living. So this holiday, when each of us is receiving our gifts and all the long walks that brought them to us, may we each remember to be gracious and accepting of not only the gifts we have been given, but also the love that they represent. And may we find comfort in the fact that we have the rest of our lives to keep those gifts and that precious love moving. So may it be. Amen.